One of the most infamous stories of the First World War revolved around an act of barbarism that would still be debated today. The story of the crucified soldier revolves around the brutality of German forces. However, how true is this story? Did this event actually occur, or was it just an act of propaganda? Around the 24th of April 1915, it is reported that 3 witnesses saw an unidentified Canadian soldier near the battlefield of Ypres in Belgium. Private George Barry stated, "On the 24th day of April, at St. Julien, I saw a small party of Germans about 50 yards away. I was horrified to see that a man in a British uniform was literally crucified, being fastened to the post by 8 bayonets. He was suspended about 18 inches from the ground, the bayonets being driven through his legs, shoulders, throat and testicles. The eyewitness accounts of the events were contradictory, and no crucified body was found. Also, there was no knowledge of the identity of the soldier." On the 10th of May 1915, The Times, a British newspaper, reported the events under the short title, "Torture of a Canadian Officer." Within the piece, it stated that Canadian soldiers wounded at Ypres had told how one of their officers had been crucified to a wall by bayonets thrust through his hands and feet, before having another bayonet driven through his throat. Then his body was riddled with bullets. The soldiers said it had been seen by the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, and that they heard the story through the Fusilier soldiers. 2 days later in the House of Commons, Sir Robert Houston asked the Under Secretary of State for War, Harold Tenant, whether he had any information about the crucifixion of 3 Canadian soldiers who were captured by the Germans, and if they had been nailed up using bayonets to the side of a wooden structure. Tenant replied that no such information of an atrocity had reached the War Office. Inquiries would now be made about the incidents. On the 15th of May, the Times published a letter from a member of the army saying that the crucified soldier was in fact a sergeant. This letter also contained information saying that he had been found fixed to a wooden fence of a farm building. It also said that the soldier had been stabbed with bayonets and had many puncture wounds to his body. The letter also said that the soldier could have been dead when he was crucified. Sir Robert Houston asked on the 19th of May again and questioned Harold Tennant, asking if he had any official information on the events, including when the Canadians were driven back and when they had to leave 40 of their soldiers in a barn. He asked, did the Germans bayonet all the wounded? In this questioning, Houston also implied that the Germans had removed the figure of Christ from a large village crucifix and fastened the sergeant whilst alive to the cross, and whether he is aware of any crucifixion of our soldiers and whether it's becoming a normal practice for the Germans. Tenant replied that the military authorities in France were briefed to send any information on any atrocities as soon as they had it. Colonel Ernest J. Chambers, the Canadian chief censor, started to investigate the story. He would search for eyewitnesses and he found one particular private who had sworn that he saw 3 Canadian soldiers bayoneted to a door 3 miles from St. Julien. Around the world, the story made headline news, and the Allies used this event in propaganda, portraying the Germans to be barbaric and sadistic murderers. However, a Canadian soldier, who allegedly helped to take the body down, suggested that the crucified soldier was a sergeant from the medical service. This line of inquiry led to the soldier being identified as Sergeant Thomas Elliot of Brantford. Elliot later wrote to his local pastor to report that it hadn't been him. In 1918, the British artist Francis Derwent Wood created a 32-inch high sculpture called Canada's Golgotha, which indicated a Canadian soldier being crucified on a barn door whilst being surrounded by jeering Germans. This was to be included in an exhibition. However, the German government requested that the Canadian government acknowledge this story to be untrue. The Canadian response was that they had sufficient evidence showing it to be true. The sculpture was not shown again until the 1990s. In 2002, rather interestingly, a documentary was transmitted as part of the UK Channel 4's Secret History series. In this, documentary filmmaker Ian Overton discovered new evidence that identified the crucified soldier as Sergeant Harry Band of the Central Ontario Regiment of the Canadian Infantry. Sergeant Band was reported missing in action on the 24th of April 1915 near Ypres. Interestingly, other soldiers in his unit wrote to Band's sister expressing their condolences, and a year later one confirmed in a letter to her that Band was in fact the crucified soldier and that the stories were true. Band's body has never been recovered and is commemorated today at the memorial at the Menin Gate. However, one issue remains, and that was that a soldier under the name Harry Banks enlisted in the Overseas Expeditionary Force in September 1915, 5 months after the crucifixion supposedly took place. So is the story of the crucified soldier true, and did those Germans barbarically torture him? Or is it a story passed from the trenches that gathered momentum and the British War Office saw the value in using it as propaganda? Thank you for watching The Untold Past. To support the channel, please subscribe. Thank you.